Here with me now are a couple of faces you'll recognize from the series, Giovanni Samuels and Brian Hearn, two cast members who spent multiple seasons on All That in the early 2000s. Welcome to you both.
I think the main point of us participating in this documentary was to make sure that this doesn't continue.
Your former boss, Dan Schneider, posted a video defending himself. He also apologized for his actions.
I am so sorry to any kid who ever had to do a dare.
Sorry, I can't. I have to laugh because him just going, I'm so sorry, into the camera's like, call someone and apologize then, bro. Like, if you're so sorry, it's like telling this nobody camera. It's like me right now talking, but there's at least people here. But still, you know, he's saying, it's like, bro, then call someone and stop calling people to have them support you. That's not. He has the time to pick up the phone to get people to try to convince people to support him, but he can't apologize to the people. It's unbelievable. He's such a joke. Come on, Dan. All right.
Anything that they didn't want to do or weren't comfortable doing. We went out of our way to make sure they were safe and that everything was done properly. But if a kid was scared and didn't want to do it, kids shouldn't have had to do it.
Yeah.
Period, the end.
Right.
And if I had known at the time, I would have changed it on the spot.
If he had known at the time, he would have changed it on the spot. Why are you both laughing?
Because he definitely knew. He definitely knew it was wrong. He was a grown adult. In my opinion, he knew it wasn't okay, which is why they're like, it's annoying when someone says they didn't know when it was obvious. It was obvious.
My thing about his interview as a whole is I thought it was funny.
What do you think was funny about it?
If I could be candid, Dan was an actor before all of this. And so I think that he brushed off some chops and gave us a nice performance. Where was all of this apologizing?
True.
When Jeanette McCurdy's book came out?
Or when Angelique Bates had said something.
Yeah, very publicly.
Very publicly.
And
also when I protested in 2022, also spoke out about it in 2019 in an Instagram live. I mean, I showed up to the building. It was everywhere. It was in Vanity Fair. It was in Variety. It was in Rolling Stone. It was in every publication. And Dan didn't apologize then either. So there's been now a lot of people who have come forward before the documentary. But now the documentary is what? Because the industry is now calling him out. What he needs as a safe haven, what he needs to exist in, his safe haven is calling him out. So he's like, no! It's fine when the individuals do because they're not the safe haven. They're the prey. He's like, whatever to the prey. Exactly. But the safe havens, that's what he needs. That's who he's honestly, in my opinion, apologizing to. And do you see how he right away also wanted to scapegoat and blame the safe haven? Because predators are alleged predators. They're aware of how the safe haven is enabling their behavior. That when Dan Schneider says, oh, my boss above my boss above my boss, that's because he is aware of how he needs that boss, those bosses. That doesn't excuse the bosses from Dan Schneider's predatory behavior at all. It actually shows the safe haven and what's enabling someone like Dan Schneider to behave the way that they are. But Dan Schneider telling everyone how he had these bosses is letting us know how self-aware he is of the safe haven and how they were allowing his bad behavior because predators are self-aware.
What's an apology without accountability? Realistically, if you take the inappropriate jokes away, do you have a show anymore? Take all the foot jokes, take all the face shots, all of that inappropriateness. Is it just commercials then? The foot stuff was crazy.
He did not just go, do you even have a show without your inappropriate material? Such a great question. Does he? Does Dan Schneider have a show, have a script without his inappropriate behavior? That's for the world to decide. Most likely, no. Is it just commercials? Yeah.
Never liked the foot stuff.
He thought the foot stuff was funny. You're like, I'm a paid
don't
actor.
get it.
I'm going to execute on the foot stuff.
Yeah.
And then you kind of look to your left.
And everybody in the room, or at least the adults, are laughing. You go along with it.
Dan had this to say about diversity.
Diversity has always been very important to me in my shows. If you go back to the very first Nickelodeon show I ever made, that's very evident, as it is in the second one, and then the first movie I ever made for Nickelodeon, which starred Kenan and Kel, and every show I did after that had a lead black actor in it.
And he's like, and then he has Boogie here in this. You're like, dude, Dan. How Dan doesn't even know accountability, same goes for diversity and talking about it. You can clearly see that.
You were the only 2 black actors on all that, right?
Yes.
What do you think when he says that?
My gripe with the way that question was answered is that the question itself was posed to him about us.
Right.
It was about us. He said, "Oh, I jump-started the careers of Kenan and Kel." So they talked about us being overlooked, and then he overlooked us in his answer.
Right.
What do you do with that?
Have you guys spoken to Dan since? Recently in the last weeks?
Yeah, I got a phone call.
Oh.
He reached out a
What?
week before the documentary aired. He asked if
I love, like right before the doc aired, Dan Schneider reaches out to Giovanni. Dan, if you have nothing to hide, like for me, for example, like when I see people talk, like I have nothing to hide, like literally at all. When you have nothing to hide, you're like, let me sit down and like talk about the thing and show the thing. And Dan had every opportunity to sit down during Quiet on Set and tell his side of the story. You get it. But he didn't, because he wanted, like we were talking about earlier, is to control the narrative, not to share the narrative with how others were experiencing something. He wanted to control that narrative. And that's exactly what he did with Boogie, with his warped mind.
I could give a
Dan
quote
Warp.
of support.
He didn't know that you were in the...
He knew I was in the He knew I was in the documentary for a year. And he was like, "Oh, I love Gio. She's great. She's nice. It's great. She could tell my side." And
Now I know why he didn't call me. He knew. He was like, definitely not calling Alexa.
I don't know what you want.
I don't know what possessed him.
So he asked you if you would give a quote of support. And what did you say?
He asked, because I did come back to do Henry Danger, which was some time later. He was like, "You had a good time on set, right? Right?"
And you said?
I told him I was terrified of him.
Was he surprised by that?
I don't know. I said, "You had the power to make people stars." And I was intimidated by you. I wanted to do a good job.
The children of the next generation, if our children should so decide one day to say, put me in front of the camera.
Would you say yes?
As dad today, with my 4-year-old and my 10-year, no.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, see, but that's the thing to really acknowledge also about our parents. There was no child star awareness during our childhood. And so now it's child stars are the ones who are informing people about what it was like and the implications of the industry when you are a child. Because also the only way to understand it is to understand how it impacts your adulthood. And we've learned that with Judy Garland. There's so many past Hollywood child stars that we were like, oh my God, they were giving them PILLS and the whole thing. Hollywood has been horrible to everyone in it for so long. Don't even get me started on how the grips are treated. One day the grip stock is going to come out. I can't wait for that. One day, like, it won't be about actors. Like, this is how the privileged people in that scenario are being treated. Now imagine everyone who's behind the camera. You know, you have grip, you have transportation, and they're there 2 hours before you, setting the whole thing up, and there's a whole thing. And then PAs just look like they're about to explode as they run around the studio or run around the set because of how their bosses are pressuring them and the whole thing. I mean, the entire set environment. And I really hope that eventually it does zoom out into how everyone is treated on set, because it's not just actors. It is everyone. And I've seen it for myself. How everyone's treated. PAs yelling at makeup, makeup's yelling at hair, and hair is yelling at wardrobe, and everyone's just it's a lot being on set, surprisingly. And it's not really necessarily a very family, you know, people say, oh, set life is family. Yeah, sure. It's like, but when you think about family, what kind of family are we talking? Sometimes it's dysfunctional. Sometimes it's a toxic family. It can vary. So I'm hoping that eventually that does broaden out and we're able to hear also how people behind the scenes are treated, because I have seen some very inappropriate behavior for them as well that I hope gets acknowledged eventually.
Brian, in the series, we hear a really heartbreaking story of when you're told you're not going to be asked back.
Yeah.
And that day clearly had an impact on the relationship you had with your mom.
Yeah.
Oh my God, his mom.
The day that we were told.
She's so cute.
In that moment, he grew up and his body language showed it. Just showed this man protruding out. And that's a man that didn't trust his mom anymore. It ruined us. And you can't get that, like the moment you can't get that.
It sounds like you were trying to protect him and do the right thing, and it came at a tremendous cost. Can you explain that?
I wasn't looking for my son to be this great star, and that's my dependency. My dependency is raising a healthy child. I'm a Leo. I don't know if that makes a difference to any of you guys. I'm a lion, right? I don't mind being in my cave and licking my nails, but I have nails.
How bad was your relationship? I mean,
I love that. I'm not a Leo, I'm a Leo rising, but I'm going to take that regardless. It's an amazing, she's hilarious. I feel so bad for her because this is true when it comes to the industry and how it divided, again, predatory behavior, divides the children with their parents. And to be honest, like that happened to so many children in the industry, is the division that ended up happening with their parents, with their family. And that's the people that you first learn to trust in this world. And that can really, really honestly amplify already maybe issues that are happening in the family. That just adds a whole new layer onto it. And it's just so sad to witness. Okay, we'll continue.
yeah, how bad did it get?
Was ruined.
It wasn't, and for 6 months, I was really mad at my mom.
No, it was all of his life.
Yeah.
From 13 on.
Yeah.
And
You had a rift between you.
Yeah. He didn't trust me anymore. He was resentful. He ran away from home.
Yeah.
So what brought you back together?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
The documentary.
How?
Wow.
It was a light bulb moment to go back in time and discover, as a mom, that moment ruined us.
So there's a clip. It's never been seen before.
So heartbreaking that this documentary is what brought them back together. So the industry tore them apart and strangely brought them back together. But that's just so wild to think about, is it not? Wow.
Another Black actor who was featured in the series, and I want to play that now.
There was a scene we were doing, it was called The Literals. And every time I said spit it out, she would spit what was in her mouth, whether it was the water or whatever, like directly in my face. Everybody thought it was so funny. Ha ha ha. Everybody's laughing. Me, I did not find it funny. The third time, I was like infuriated. Like I was so mad that the director hurried and put me on the side of the set and was like, listen, Raquel, breathe in, breathe out. She's the star of the show.
Oh, there it is.
He said, don't make too much of a problem.
There it is.
I'm going to ask her not to spit in your face, but you have to keep your cool.
Woo!
Why is that so disturbing to you, Brian?
Talk about Amanda Bynes, right? Spitting.
I obviously did not know that story. I've only had one solid conversation with Raquel, but oh my God, that hit me really hard. To just be told you don't matter in that moment, you're being spit on, and it's like, okay, this person matters more than you.
Because she's a star.
Take it.
Yeah. And there's a cultural difference, too, right? We are culturally trained to take it.
Joining us now for an exclusive interview is an actor from All That who's coming forward for the first time. Shane Lyons, thank you for being here today.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, but you're having a white girl spitting on a, like that, and then you're telling her to calm down. Like, what? No. And this is why it kind of upsets me about Dan saying diversity and saying, oh, because there's 2, 1. Oh, yeah, and now Boogie, you're here. You're like, what is happening? That is the problem, is especially when white people are like, let me tell you about diversity and how I control it. You're like, please go away. It's my 2 cents on that, okay? White people telling the world about diversity and how they control it. That's all I heard from Dan Schneider. Telling yourself much, Dan? You know, it's just freaks me out. I'm just being honest.
You bet. You were on the set with Brian Peck.
I was on the set with Brian Peck, yeah.
Was he as charming as people would describe him? I mean,
100%. There were certainly some passes, you know.
that he made on you.
Yeah.
Did you realize at the time that they were passes?
No. When he asked me if I knew what was, I thought they were racket.
What did he say?
Some conversation was happening in the green room, and we get called to set, and Brian follows behind me, and I'm kind of alone in the green room set, and he sits next to me and goes, because previously in the conversation they were talking about, and I just didn't know what they were. And he goes, well, we know what. All right, Shane. And I said, yeah, like racket
So
balls.
he's talking about BLUEBALLS, which doesn't exist, by the way. Back in the day, men loved to use that shit on people that said no. That was like it's physiological, it's psychological, it's physiological. You can't say no. I hurt when you say no. You know that that's coercion? Did no one teach you about coercion? What that is? Doesn't exist, dude. But I heard a lot when I was younger. I heard about it a lot. There was one time I was again at Andrew Caldwell's party. I love bringing up Andrew Caldwell's party. He's part of the Lord now of this. Lore, sorry, not the Lord. Here, I'll tell you a little bit about the parties. There was obviously drinks there. And so all the guys were, now when I look back at it, that was part of the predatory behavior, our culture, you get it. And I'll never forget it. One time this guy, I won't go into his name, brought me into a room, whatever, making out. And then he asked me to do something. And I said, no. And then he was like, what? And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And then he literally was like, wow. And he went outside and told everyone I gave him BLUEBALLS to shame me for saying no. And to be honest with you, that is what I experienced all the time at parties. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that was used as a tactic that men thought was acceptable behavior. And for them to go, oh, this is, how could you physically do this to me? You're torturing me. And that's how they would get away with the R word and SA. The worst. And then you learn later that ain't even science. That's not even true. And it's sad how many people have been pressured into things because they thought they were harming and hurting someone else by saying no. Blah. Red flag. Okay, let's continue. So of course Brian Peck's talking about that, right? Not shocking. With a child.
Didn't know what they were. And he goes, well, we know what. All right, Shane. And I said, yeah, like racket balls, right? I'm a kid, 13, 14, and as I think back now, as an adult, as a 36-year-old, and I go, would I ever have a conversation with a 13-year-old boy like he had with me? Mm-hmm. It makes absolutely zero sense for a 13-year-old girl or 13-year-old anybody. It's your kids. Why are you talking like that?
What would a protection for kids on the set since you were on the set? That makes sense. That's doable. That's enforceable. That could work. What does it look like?
So updating the law first and foremost, so that no individual who is a convicted child can ever get on a Hollywood set again. And currently there's a loophole in the law that as long as there's a guardian or a parent omnipresent on the set, they don't have to hire people who go through a background check. And I think more...
What the
Something,
fuck is this shit?
yeah, what the fuck is this? Also, let's just remember really quickly, right? When it came to Drake Bell and Brian Peck, and it came to the parents, and it came to the Amanda Show. These were adults and everyone on set, and he was able to manipulate and broom not only Drake Bell, but also the people around Drake Bell, his parents, everyone, manipulate everyone. Then, if they become a convicted SO, they're able to still work around children as long as there are adults there. There were adults around when it happened. And that's the problem. That's the problem. There should be they cannot work with children. They cannot. You want to debate it? You're like, let me find out if he does it again. Do you want to find out if he does it again? Why? Because if you lose on that bet, guess who gets harmed when you bet on this? Let's just go, that happened. Probably better for that not to happen again. And so let's remove that person from children altogether and not try to test it and see what happens with children. No.
Oddly, when you have a cult of personality in any work environment, inevitably, it's ripe for toxicity.
Dan said he had many, many layers above him. He had a boss, and his boss had a boss, and his boss had a boss.
Well, yeah. Well, it sounds like the farmer that blames the tractor for the poor harvest. It's like, not me, man. You shirk responsibility. It's pretty simple. It's
Definitely.
when you're not at a point in your life to take ownership of the mistakes you made, the first thing to do is to shift the blame to someone else. I think the lessons that hopefully the perpetrators highlighted in this film can learn, because that's ultimately what needs to happen, is them learning and everyone else learning too. If they can't do that, then there's no chance of them actually growing or changing or evolving. I'm hoping that the impact sustains and it's not just a flash in the pan of the interest.
Same.
But there's real change that needs to occur.
Real change.
And I'm hoping this is a first stepping stone for that.
Same. Give them a round of applause. Round of applause for everyone that sat down for episode 5. I thought it was great in the sense where it was nice to also see him add his perspective and his own personal experience when it came to knowing Brian Peck, and how important it is for this to not just be a trend. Please don't trend our trauma. If you care about this, let's do some work together. Let's keep our eyes on it. Let's support people that were directly inflicted, that were directly harmed by this. Let's support Giovanni. So incredible for them all to sit down and speak truth to power. That's really what I hope the takeaway is from the documentary, because that's really what it is.